today I'm really excited to have some wonderful speakers with us. Oh dear, Gillian, I left you off of the slide. So right away I'm going to start the webinar with an apology because I left my dear colleague, Gillian Kranias, completely off of the slide. But in addition to Gillian, who will introduce herself in a couple of minutes, and you will see her lovely picture in just a little while, we have Nicole Niedra-Biordi from Niagara region, Krista Long from the Waterloo region, and Sara
Haalboon.
Sara Haalboon, who's a community volunteer from Waterloo region as well. So as I mentioned, this is the third in a series of 4 webinars from HC Link, all talking about policy development. And the purpose of today's webinar is to talk about some tools and techniques that you can use either to build new or to strengthen existing relationships with elected officials. So we're going to do a little bit of introduction and welcome Steph, and then we're going to talk about some tools and some approaches that you can use to identify the positions of the elected officials in your community. And then we're going to talk about storytelling and public narrative as a tool that you can use to bring folks on your side with your policy issue. And then we're going to finish with some questions and discussion. Now, we will take questions at the very end of the webinar, but please feel free to use the chat box throughout the webinar today to ask questions as we go along. We'll also be posting some links in the chat box, and please do feel free to go back and forth and share your ideas and all of your opinions on this topic. So we're going to start out with a couple of poll questions just to find out a little bit about who you are. So first of all, we're going to start with some pretty easy questions. If you can tell us where in the province you're calling in from and what sector you work in. Great. So it looks like we've got folks from right across the province. Unfortunately, I've hidden part of my poll. I'll apologize, everyone. Just going to do a little bit of redecorating here so we can fully see everyone. And then at the same time, there's this the glories of technology. Okay, fantastic. So the next question is a little more text-heavy, and I'm going to give everyone just a couple of moments to answer it. And actually, I completely lied because this is another multiple-choice question. So we wanted to find out from you how much work you have already been doing or have done with elected officials. Is this a new area for you? Is this something you're just branching out into? Is this old hat and every weekday for you? Great. So we've got a lot of people with a little bit of experience, and we've got a few folks in the room who work with elected officials every day, and a handful of folks who are just getting started with this work. Great. So I'm going to pass the reins over to Gillian, who is going to start. Actually, no, we're starting with Nicole today, aren't we?
We're going to go to
My apologies. I've gotten everything all mixed today. So Nicole, we're going to start off with you, and we're really lucky to have Nicole here today. Nicole has done some work with us in the past. She was at the HC Link conference about a year ago now, doing a talk show style panel with me on policy, and Nicole has such a great amount of experience to share with us and some really fabulous tools to share. So Nicole, I'm going to let you introduce yourself more thoroughly and pass the reins over to you.
Great, thanks. So you can hear me okay, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my name is Nicole Niedra-Biordi, and I am a policy analyst here in Niagara Region Public Health. Just going to figure out how I can work the slides. Okay, so just to provide some context, I thought that I would briefly talk about my role very quickly. One of my key responsibilities is to support policy initiatives across the Chronic Disease and Injury Prevention Division here in Niagara. Among a variety of other things, I support the division by helping to identify opportunities to collaborate to advance public health goals, whether that be collaborating with other departments within the region, community groups, or other local area municipalities. One of the tools that we developed here is the Strategic Plan Matrix, which is used to help us better align our work with the 12 municipalities in our region. And this is going to be the focus of what I'm going to talk about today. And in light of yesterday's election, it really is timely. I'll touch very briefly on the review of municipal meeting minutes and a media tracking tool, both of which we use here in Niagara as well, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about those. You can find more information as well as the templates for these tools on the Healthy Living Niagara website under Community Policy. And I'm also open and available to have a quick chat with anybody who is interested in learning more about the tools that we use here. So feel free to connect with me and we can set something up. I'm not sure if my slides are the only ones that went blank.
We can actually still see you okay, Nicole.
Okay, because my slides are...
Why don't I try advancing to your next slide and see how it goes?
Sure, yeah, because I don't have anything on my screen. It's all just blank.
Okay, so now we're on your strategic planning slide.
Okay, sure. So in its simplest form, strategic planning involves articulating, developing, and communicating a vision for an organization, a project, or an initiative, and then allocating the appropriate resources to achieve the vision. So resources can include staff time, dollars, etc. So strategic planning essentially establishes a framework which guides decision-making. I'm sure almost everyone has been involved in some strategic planning in some capacity. I just included this slide so you can kind of get a sense of the perspective that I'm coming from. So if we can switch to the next slide. So now municipal strategic planning. Historically, municipalities haven't always been the greatest at strategic planning. Given the nature of municipal responsibilities, a significant amount of attention has been directed at day-to-day services and the more immediate needs of its residents. Municipalities have a growing number of responsibilities, pressures which I'm sure most people are aware of. However, only a limited number of ways to generate revenue. Therefore, there's an increased need to plan in order to determine how to best allocate these resources. Strategic planning allows municipalities to step back from the day-to-day service delivery and consider what it is doing and whether there are better alternatives. More recently, there has been a greater interest or appreciation for the tools which municipalities can use to plan for the future. Municipal operating capital budgets are examples of mechanisms which can be used as a strategic planning tool. Not all municipalities use them as such, however, some are starting to see value in that. The funds that are allotted through these budgets indicate what a municipality has essentially identified as a key priority. My discussion today is not going to focus on budgets at all. However, it is just something moving forward to be cognizant of as we move into new years, new councils. These are things that you might come across and see, and there is value in kind of understanding and learning where municipalities are spending their dollars or allocating their dollars. So we can advance to the next slide. This process of strategic planning will vary across different municipalities. However, many engage the public to develop a better understanding of the challenges facing the community. Consultation with the public not only increases council's awareness of what is important to residents, but by providing information throughout the consultation process, there is an opportunity for the public to develop an appreciation for the multiple issues facing council, and then getting insight into why certain decisions are made. Council faces so many different, key priorities, key issues, so sometimes when the public can understand how those decisions are weighted and made, it just leads to better acceptability of the directions that are chosen. So if we assume that municipal strategic planning occurs with at least some degree of input from residents, then the directions that are set are a good indicator of what both residents and council have identified as key challenges facing the community, providing insight into how resources will be spent. So it really is a good way of identifying where council will go throughout their term, in terms of allocating their resources and putting attention what they're going to focus on, where they're going to want to pursue further initiatives. If we can advance again to the next slide. So municipal strategic plans. Some municipalities call these business plans, strategic priorities, or even council objectives. Although there are a variety of terms, each of these documents essentially set out priorities that will guide decision-making for a given period of time. These plans can be developed for the term of council, that can also be developed to span over much longer periods. So for example, a 10 or 20-year strategy. And a lot of these longer-term strategies, they do have periods for review built in. So it's important to kind of be familiar with those so that you can be looking for periods where they might be looking to review them, assessing the priorities, and potentially changing direction. So we can move to the next slide again. The Strategic Plan Matrix is a tool which was created to help develop a better understanding of our local municipal priorities and to identify potential opportunities for alignment and collaboration. To provide some context, we have 12 municipalities here in Niagara Region, most of which do have a strategic plan. A lot of the work that we do in public health requires us to collaborate with our local municipalities. So understanding the specific challenges that they face provides us with insight around readiness and capacity for involvement. As I've already mentioned, many municipalities develop strategic plans to outline their key priorities for a given period of time. The Strategic Plan Matrix provides a high-level outline of each of these. And I'll show you in the next couple of slides a screenshot of this matrix so you can kind of get a sense of what it is that I'm talking about. But I'm first going to just touch on the process for developing this. So if we can move to the next slide. The first step is to create an inventory of existing strategic plans and review each of them to identify common themes. Most of this information should be posted on municipal websites. However, if you're unable to access the documents, you could try to connect with your municipal clerk to inquire. Maybe the municipality doesn't have one, maybe they're in the process of developing one, or maybe it's just a matter of them not having it uploaded to their website. Municipalities may have unique needs. However, from my experience conducting the review, many of the issues or areas of focus are very similar. So for example, economic development, land use planning, healthy communities, these are all higher level areas of focus which came out of the review that I conducted. And it's the way in which municipalities choose to address the priority areas which sets them apart. So when you're looking at strategic plans, they're not specifically talking about the key on the ground ways of addressing those higher level goals. They're just talking about, you know, the priorities that they're defining. At first glance, it may be difficult to find similarities between municipal strat plans. However, after becoming familiar with the content, themes really do start to come out, even out of the most detailed content. So it's not until really the end that you get to review all of them that you see that some are saying very similar things. They might be talking about planning, they might be talking about environmental responsibility in different ways, but they're essentially talking about the same thing. And then the next step is to populate the template accordingly, and then finally develop a dissemination plan. So if we can move to the next slide, here's a snapshot of the template. And by looking at this document, you're able to see the areas that a municipality has committed to developing or focusing on for a given period of time. On the left, we have common themes that came out of the review of strategic plans. So you have healthy communities, engagement and partnerships, community planning and development, economic sustainability, and environmental responsibility. Under each of those themes, we have sub-themes. So under health and communities, you have improved healthcare services, access and delivery, promote active living, improve and enhance a built environment, and then decrease financial barrier. We can see here, these were included so that we can make reference. When a municipality was talking about healthy communities, they were referring to improved health or promote active living, etc. So if you look on the right columns, municipality D, when they referenced healthy communities in their strategic plan, they were referring to improved health care. But then municipality E, when they talked about healthy communities, they were referring to promoting active living, improving and enhancing a built environment, etc. So as I've already alluded to, the X's on the right indicate the discussion about the theme is in the is referenced in that strategic plan. You can see in this example that there are a lot of commonalities between the municipalities. Again, we often hear about the unique needs of municipalities, and sometimes this argument can be used as a barrier preventing collaboration. However, after reviewing the plans, it becomes apparent that although they might be saying different things, many of the longer-term goals actually do align. So if we move into the engagement and partnerships theme, and we look at funding opportunities, we can see across the board all of the municipalities and all the strategic plans have referenced funding opportunities or partnerships with other levels of government as a key area. Here in Niagara, we have a two-tier level of government. So we have a regional government as well as our local municipalities. So we can also include both the regional council plan, we can include our public health priorities, as well as all of the area municipalities, all in one document, so we can really get a good visual of where everyone's priorities align. We can move over to the next slide. So as we saw in the snapshot, the matrix provides a visual tool to easily identify common goals. However, it can also be useful when determining who you may approach when seeking potential partners to move an initiative forward. If we know that a municipality is committed to creating a healthy community by promoting active living, for example, they may be a great partner when looking to roll out an initiative around access to recreation. The matrix can also inform how you frame issues. If you understand how a municipality is defining their priorities, then you can leverage that commitment by using similar language and perspective when presenting your ask. If you can demonstrate how your initiative helps the municipality to achieve their goals, your chances of success are increased. And finally, as discussed earlier in previous slides, many municipalities engage their citizens when identifying priorities. Therefore, the information captured in the matrix is a good indication of what the local need or gaps are. You can use this information and to look and identify gaps, to identify whether or not you're able to kind of address some of those. So if you know that a municipality doesn't have the capacity to work to move a specific initiative forward, then you can present that and position your ask in that type of way. However you do choose to use the matrix, it's important to discuss this within your dissemination plan so that you can really be on the same page with those who you're sharing the information with. The template, although it does help identify common themes, it provides a lot more value when you can actually take that information and then incorporate it into different documents with different partners. So that's just a suggestion that I would provide so that you can consider that when you do communicate and provide the matrix to colleagues or whoever else you might share it with. We can move now to the next slide. Given yesterday's election, you might have seen a lot of change or just subtle differences in the composition of council. Regardless, this is the start of a new term, which will likely see some new priorities. Not all municipalities will see the need or have the capacity to develop a strategic plan. However, there has been a noticeable shift in this thinking. So even our smallest municipality here in Niagara is considering the development of a strategic plan to guide their council for the term. Last term, they didn't have a strategic plan. However, they are planning on doing that now. So there's definitely a shift in the thinking. The strategic planning process can take a year or even longer. However, it is important to keep a pulse on what's happening. So monitoring the media and reviewing municipal council meeting minutes are ways to identify what council is talking about. Discussion about what happened at council may be sporadic, so it's important to track the articles that you find so that you can easily recall them and see how discussion has evolved over time. A simple spreadsheet can be effective at capturing the main messages, dates the articles are posted, as well as the public responses to the articles. If reviewing council meeting minutes, some of the key search terms that you could include would be strategic planning, business plan, council objectives, priority setting, etc. By reviewing the minutes, you're able to determine whether any work is underway to develop the plans or objectives, and it's also a good way to gain insight into particular councillors by identifying specific ideas that are being brought forward, the discussions that are happening. So within those minutes, which is another tool that you can access and get more information through the Healthy Living Niagara site, you can actually learn more specifically about those individual councillors. And as I've mentioned before, strategic plans may be developed for a term of council or to guide decision-making over longer periods of time. You can use the next few months to create an inventory of existing strategic documents to determine whether or not new ones can be anticipated in the coming years. Other documents such as sustainability plan, economic development plan, and budgets may also be informative if you take the time to review them. So you have the opportunity now to get ahead and develop a solid understanding of the current context, which will help to identify changes as a result of our new councils. I can personally say that I'm very excited to be able to conduct this review for a second time at the beginning of a term. The last time that I did do the review, all of the plans were already in place, and it's a lot more work to have to collect all the existing documents and review them all at the same time. I was also in a position where I wasn't able to be part of the consultations. I wasn't able to see what was happening, see the different key ideas and priorities that were considered as part of the consultation. So there was a bulk of information that I couldn't access. So I'm excited to be able to see that this time around. And although if you are working with a number of different municipalities, it might seem to be a lot of work to complete this review. However, the information is very valuable, and it is something that you only do every few years. So I would definitely recommend trying it out, at least keeping a pulse of or collecting that inventory to see whether or not municipalities in your area have these plans. And it might give insight into whether or not it's a worthwhile activity. And that's all I have for my presentation.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. You actually have another 8 minutes. If there's anything else, not to put you on the spot, but if there's a particular story or experience maybe that you want to share, or anything else that you think might be interesting to folks.
I would actually, now I focus specifically on the strategic plans just because I only had those 20 minutes, so didn't want to try to cover too much. But I would suggest that using the different tools, and again, those are on the Healthy Living Niagara website, in conjunction is definitely useful and helpful. The strategic plans give a sense of those higher arching, higher level themes that a municipality will choose to focus on. But it is through those council meeting minutes that you can get a sense of, the specific positions of those elected officials. So that will give more detail and insight into how those higher level priorities are actually being formulated. Given that we are at the start of new council, a lot of they might be very motivated, so you might be gathering a lot of information right up front, which is definitely valuable to monitor. And we have templates as part of that council meeting minute review that really just provide a good way to populate that information and synthesize and categorize the specific topic areas that you find. Another thing that I would suggest is the media analysis and media tracking. You can gain a lot of different insight from the media articles that are posted, the specific comments that the public sometimes provides as part of those or in response to those articles can provide a lot of insight into how people feel about the specific things that are being discussed in council. So even if the public wasn't included up front as part of a consultation process, you can still gather some of that information based on some of the comments that are included. Particular story.
Well, we have a question from the chat box, Nicole, and it's a good one. It is, what is the difference between a strategic plan and an official plan?
Well, the official plan focuses mainly on how land use planning, how things are going to be developed. It's more particular to growth and development, whereas the strategic plan will talk about things like volunteerism. We'll talk about healthy communities in the sense of programming that's going to take place. It might be things like how one of the key areas, and it wasn't on the snapshot that I captured, was that the municipalities wanted two-way communication with Niagara region. So that was another thing that was highlighted. So it's much more loose in terms of the things that I might focus on. It might be kind of organizational things that they might improve. Another key area was customer service. So it's a lot about the operational type things and not so much about the growth and development of the municipality, if that's clear enough.
That's great, thanks. All right, well, thanks so much, Nicole. I've heard you talk about these tools in the past, but I could cheerfully listen to you talk about them over and over again. I think they're so useful, and one of the things that I love in particular about what Nicole has talked about and what Gillian's going to talk about in a few moments is that they really are very complementary approaches. With some of the tools that Nicole has talked about, gives you an idea of what is important to the municipality, what is important to the elected officials. It gives you an idea of how what's important to you might be framed in a way. Once you've identified that, then you can go forward and tell your story. So with that, I'm going to pass the reins over to my colleague Gillian Kranias to introduce herself and her two colleagues in this webinar today.
Thank you, Andrea. So, yeah, I'm sure, Krista, that you in particular were listening to what Nicole was sharing and thinking about how the work you did before the storytelling engagement part was similar, like that analytical piece. That's a part of the work of figuring out how we want to work with elected officials. So a little bit about myself. I'm a bilingual health promotion consultant here at HC Link, and I'm going to tell you mostly about I have quite a broad range of experience working with partnerships, networks, doing some community change and policy change work at local levels, I would say, is where I've had that experience. And today I was approached by Andrea, do you want to do something around storytelling? We had a peer sharing about storytelling through HC Link back in February, which we're going to share the link with you at the end of this webinar. But that's always been, or recently been, a passion of mine. I've been studying and experimenting with the power of story to ignite and catalyze our community change efforts. So today I invited two guests from Waterloo Region to share with us their experiences of doing this on the ground in the context of working with candidates, because this was just in the last 6 months, so it was pre-election, but a similar context to working with elected officials. And I'll tell you my history of my connection with Krista and the Waterloo Region Roundtable was that some of you know we do offer consultations and do short-term collaborative work with different initiatives around the province. And so I had been assigned to work with Waterloo Region Roundtable on their initiative, which became the Food Spaces Vibrant Places campaign. And myself, with my background in taking a storytelling approach, when I brought that to Krista, she kind of matched my enthusiasm. So from there, she went on to develop, along with her collaborators in Waterloo Region, a really highly integrated, professional and engaged campaign in the Waterloo Region around making some policy bylaw changes at the local level. And they've integrated storytelling in different ways into this work. So before I introduce Krista and then Sara, I want to tell you a bit about how we've organized this section of the webinar. First, I'm going to interview Krista about the campaign from her perspective, as she's the campaign coordinator, and how she's been leading their efforts with this multi-layered storytelling approach. Then we'll sort of pause for 5 minutes for some theoretical slides and resources on storytelling and public narrative that I will share with you. And after that, I'm going to interview Sara Haalboon and her experiences in the same campaign as a community volunteer. So she's bringing a very different angle on this, and really looking forward to hearing what she has to share in the interview. I'm hoping we can reproduce today some of the rich conversations that we had preparing for this webinar, and your questions later on can take us even deeper. So welcome, Krista, and welcome, Sara. I will introduce you one at a time. When I get to Sara, I'll do a bit more of your sort of quick bio. So now we're going to enter into conversation with Krista. And I'll just briefly let you know, you might have read it on the website, Krista Long is a passionate advocate for local food systems. She's worked for the Canadian Organic Growers, Jane Goodall Institute, Ontario Farmland Trust, Evergreen and the Waterloo Region Food System Roundtable. And I think from here, Krista, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself further, and can you tell us why you ended up with this role in this campaign?
Thanks, Gillian. Sure. So I'm a local consultant here in Waterloo Region, and I've been working with the Waterloo Region Food System Roundtable for the past couple of years, looking at municipal food policy research. So first I did a review of the types of themes that municipalities could incorporate into their official plan policies around local food. And it's interesting that you had mentioned Nicole's project, because I had actually come up with a similar comparison where we took all of those identified themes and then we looked at each of the 7 municipalities' official plans to see what current themes they had in their official plans and made recommendations for how they can improve their official plans to address access to healthy food, community gardens, and temporary farmers markets better. And then last year I worked on a research project where we then kind of delved in a little bit deeper into the official plan policies and the zoning bylaws to identify specific changes that we could recommend to each municipality, and that ended up with this campaign. And the reason why we rolled out the Food Spaces, Vibrant Places campaign the way we did this year was that each of the municipalities is at varying stages of their zoning bylaw review process. However, with the municipal election, we really saw that as an opportunity to get out and talk to each of the municipal candidates and get a feel for where their position was at in regard to access to healthy food and supporting community gardens and temporary farmers markets. So I'll just lead into your next question, unless you want to ask it, Gillian.
Sure, I'll ask it. And I just wanted to check in, would you like to advance the slides, or would you like me to do that?
Oh, right. Slides. That would be helpful.
So you can take the hand on that. If you have any trouble, just let me know.
Sure.
So my next question is for you to take us through the past 10 months and what the group has done.
Sure. Okay, so we began with kind of where we left off, with conversations with municipal staff, municipal planning staff, about the official plan policies and the zoning bylaw policies, and we asked them for their input on a very draft advocacy strategy, and we showed them what we wanted to do and got their feedback, and that was really helpful in informing the strategy moving forward, and it actually helped us frame it and focus it just on the 3 cities within Waterloo Region. So there are 7 area municipalities, and we focused on the 3 cities here, Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo. We then developed the strategy, finalized the strategy with our roundtable working group, volunteers, and of course with Gillian's support. So once we had the strategy in place, we got to work, and we were quite busy in developing a website, which you see on your screen in front of you. So the website shared what the campaign was about, what we were really asking of the municipal candidates. We were sharing stories about different volunteers or community garden or temporary farmers markets within the region. We were sharing their stories about why access to healthy food is so important, why we needed more support through our zoning bylaws to see more community gardens and temporary farmers markets throughout our communities. And then we, of course, had our background information in the Learn More section, our background research and information for the campaign. And we also developed a petition that you see there. I think we have a close-up of that. Sorry, these are the stories that we talked about, some examples. I think there might be a close-up of the petition. I'm not too sure where it is right now, but you see it on the right-hand side. And the petition was really integral to this campaign because we wanted to engage the rest of the community in the cities to have their voice. So every person who wanted to could go onto the website and sign the petition, which was directed towards all of their ward candidates and mayoral candidates, and asked them to ensure that we would have stronger zoning bylaws that supported community gardens and temporary farmers markets. And then the other, so the other part of the that campaign was really around our social media messaging, and we developed a social media campaign to go alongside with that. So we developed a daily content calendar so we could share key campaign messages, build awareness and support for the campaign through Twitter and Facebook. So we had a Twitter and Facebook page, and these are just examples. We also developed outreach materials that we could leave behind with municipal councillors or candidates and councillors, I guess. And we also held a training session, so we trained a team of about 15 volunteers to be able to go out and meet with municipal candidates, and that will be part of the storytelling experience I'll talk about in a minute. But we ended up holding 26 meetings with municipal candidates, and we also attended some outreach events across the region. So we were at various farmers markets, temporary farmers markets, other outreach events where we could reach community members and candidates. We were at all candidates meetings, and we were talking with the community, talking about the campaign, why it was important, and we were getting people to sign the petition, and then we could enter their information on the website. So that's an overview of really what we did over the past 10 months.
Right. So that's the big picture, and now let's zero in on your storytelling approach and using experiential approach. Can you share with us then, Krista, what was behind this? Why did you use the storytelling approach, and how did it help diverse community members to engage with the campaign?
Sure. So as Gillian mentioned, we talked a lot about the training sessions for the volunteers and how we could really empower them to feel comfortable going out and meeting with their municipal candidates. Our volunteers came from very diverse backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, as well as people from public health who had worked in the field for years, to students, to very varied and different backgrounds. And a lot of the volunteers could really get behind what we were saying in this campaign. They each brought their own unique personal stories and backgrounds regarding food access to the campaign. But a lot of people had some hesitation around feeling like they needed to know everything about official plan policies and zoning bylaw policies and the policy process, and how could they have that conversation with municipal councillors, and feeling like they maybe weren't informed enough. And so the storytelling approach really helped to bring the personal element to the campaign, and to also relieve the volunteers of this feeling that they needed to be experts in the field, because they didn't. And I really think that the storytelling approach brought the campaign to life, because we were now hearing all of these great, wonderful, diverse personal stories and situations that really applied to access to healthy food. And the picture on the screen shows one such example of one of our volunteers who shared his story about how the East Asian community really doesn't have access to culturally appropriate fruits and vegetables. And so there's this man that comes in a van, and he has all of the fruits and vegetables, and he has to drive up into this parking lot, and really quickly everybody has to come and buy their fruits and vegetables, and then they have to leave before bylaw catches them and charges them or kicks them out. And that just really summarized, the barriers that we were trying to get across to the candidates, and why we needed to embrace more vibrant, food-friendly spaces within our communities. And it really highlighted how each volunteer within this campaign could bring so much to it, because by sharing that story with the candidates that they were meeting with, it really emphasized why this was important, more so than just presenting councillors with facts and information. Like, we know that 90% of people eat healthier when they have access to a market. Well, yes, that's true, and that's great, but here's now the personal story. So by sharing this experience of, we can't get the fruits and vegetables we need. Here's an opportunity to get them, but we have this barrier, the zoning bylaws, and they're stopping us from doing this. But look at the wonderful space and opportunity that it could create if we changed our zoning bylaws. That's a much more engaging conversation. So I think that was really what brought this campaign to life.
So you were taking all that incredible research and information that you had, and the strategy, and wrapping it in people wrapped it in their own individual personal story. Is that what happened?
Yes, yep.
Do you want to share any last stories of maybe how those individuals felt more confident or more engaged going out to talk with the candidate based on sort of your support for this approach?
Yeah, I don't want to take too much away from Sarah's presentation because I think when you talk to Sarah, that will really come through. But even at the training session, we found how the volunteers all of a sudden said, okay, I can do this. Once Gillian took them through the storytelling approach and everybody shared their stories, and it was interesting to see how everybody had different stories, yet they were all around the same theme, that they had encountered a lack of access to healthy food, or they had encountered all of these barriers that we were talking about. So they could bring that personal message to each of the barriers, that the zoning bylaws were restrictive, that community gardeners were having trouble finding land. We had a personal story for every single barrier that we had addressed within this campaign.
Great. Thank you, Krista, and I'm sure we'll be coming back to you later with the questions and discussions. Thank you, and for preparing those photos as well to illustrate. That's, again, the petition. Okay, now I'm going to present for about 5 minutes on some more theoretical basis. This is my favorite quote that I found a year ago, also from a Waterloo Region resource, but he's actually an American, Andy Goodman, that nobody ever marched on Washington because of a pie chart. So apple pie might mean a lot to Americans, but the pie charts, we know how valuable and important that information is, but that alone is not what brings us out, and also that alone does not motivate an elected official to put their precious time into an issue or to vote in a particular way. So the question that in preparation, in chatting with Andrea, that I wanted to look at first is, why is storytelling so compelling? So I have one slide about that, and then I have one slide to share with you the approach that I shared with the Waterloo team when we did the trainings for their group of community volunteers. So this first slide, actually, it prompted me to go back and do some more research, which is great, because as I said, I've been pursuing this topic for a couple of years, but I'm still learning. So I really tried to go back and look at why is it that storytelling is so compelling, and what's the research on that? And there's so much information about storytelling and use of storytelling and sort of the practice side of it, but not as much accessible research, because I'm not a hard scientist, about why is it so compelling. Luckily, this man, Kendall Haven, who is a professional storyteller, like a storytelling master, but had a background in scientific research and sort of took some time off from his storytelling back in 2007 to research and write this book called Story Proof. And I found that within the book, which I haven't read the whole of it, but I did listen to an audio presentation of his and as well read some chapters, that there was some helpful kind of evidence here in terms of understanding why it's so compelling. And the basic premise is that our brain is evolutionary hardwired to think, understand, and make sense through stories. And the term story net was my own wording. He speaks about the neural net, but it has to do with how our brains are wired to think in terms of story. And, there's an intuitive, aha, yeah, that makes sense when we think back about how long have pie charts been around and how long have stories been around. And so in terms of evolution, that we are much more adapted to understanding through stories than through pie charts alone. So there's some references here that Andrea will be putting up as I get through this slide. I just wanted to share with you a quote from the audio recording that is one of the links that will go up of Kendall Haven at the Aspen Ideas Festival in 2013, and he sort of described story, but this quote is very parallel to what Krista said earlier about community volunteers and sort of all that information side of going to talk to an elected official and the story side, because he said that your job is not to know the story. I mean, he may be exaggerating when he says that you don't need to know it at all, but that your job is, it's not to know the material, it is to gather up every mind in the room and shepherd them from wherever they are in the universe into and safely through the story. So, and as I listened to him and read his stuff more, I came to understand that the key there is that the content, like the data and the arguments, are only a piece. And if we just share them on their own, the person that we're sharing them with could interpret them with any points of reference. And they may end up hearing something completely different from what we set out to share with them. So if we weave that data and those arguments into story that the person we're sharing with can connect with, and we guide them, we shepherd them sort of through the journey, then we come out at the end together. I mean, that's how I saw it, and that then for me really nicely explained, yes, that's why storytelling can be so compelling in our work of engaging communities and also engaging elected officials. There's a couple of other resources. One of them is just up there now. There's a graphic which kind of describes the four different, the different things going on in the brain when we hear and when we listen to stories. And then there's also an article that's sort of written in a popular magazine in Psychology Today, but by Pamela Rutledge, who is at the University of California. And I thought it was a really good article where she talks about the psychological power of storytelling. She works in multimedia and uses the term transmedia. But basically her premise is, for all the bells and whistles of how we can share stories nowadays, because as we see out there, it's very popular storytelling. A good story is still about resonance, it's about authenticity, and it's about richness. So that's sort of the grounding of the power of the story. And I think that in Krista's example and the example we're going to hear later from Sara, we find that resonance and authenticity when we sort of look at what is our own personal story when we're sharing and connect that to the story of the campaign or the ask or whatever the community change is that you're working on. So yeah, so there's a couple of resources you can look to in that area. Turning to the next slide, it's quite possible that I was introduced to public narrative approach at a Maytree conference about 5 years ago, and that might have been my first real kind of introduction to storytelling. And I still find that in terms of the work that I do, in terms of community change, that it is just a very helpful tool. And in some senses, the simplicity of it makes it more helpful, both for beginners and as you get moving along in it. So this public narrative model was developed by Marshall Gantz, and he's at Harvard University. And he's a longtime trainer and organizer from political campaigns, unions, and nonprofit community movements. He's also credited for devising the grassroots organizing behind Obama's first presidential campaign. And that was really neat to hear about and see. When people went knocking on doors to talk to other people in their neighborhoods about Obama, they didn't say, hi, I'm here to talk about Obama and this, that, and the other. They said, hi, I'm your neighbor, and I'm here because, you know, I care about this, and so I got involved with. And so it became a story, and we saw how successful that campaign was. So the formula of public narrative is it has these three elements, and I do find most of the time you're moving in a flow, so although this image is, they're kind of balanced, you can see there's interaction between them, but generally we start with the story of self. The story of self is my unique personal story where I highlight my values and what motivates me to be meeting with an elected official or coming out to an event and speaking or whatever it is that I'm doing it, what's motivating me. The story of us is the part where Nicole's tool really comes in handy, I think, because when you're preparing a story, you have to think about who is the us that I'm trying to generate, and the us might go from me directly to the person I'm meeting with, the elected official, or it might go from me to this campaign, like say food spaces, vibrant places. So there's an us, which is like, it's not just me, but it's me and all these other people in your community. And then you're trying to broaden the us through the storytelling to bring that person you're trying to influence or the audience you're trying to influence into your circle of us as well. And so that's where you look at values, and so things that might be in a strategic plan from the municipality, you might be able to pull on those links in terms of value. And then the story of now is your strategy and it's your action. Because when you're speaking, you want to always think when you're sharing a story. And I think this is where public narrative is different from some other forms of storytelling, is we're looking for action. So we always have something we're asking for. And that ask might be quite small. It might be, I'm asking you to read this document. It might be, I'm asking you to meet with me again 2 months from now. Or it might be, I'm asking you to vote for this or that or the other. But these are the three elements that we weave together in the public narrative storytelling. So there's 2 links that got posted there. One was just to Marshall Gantz's website, and the other one is to a curriculum that explains the public narrative. There it goes. The public narrative there's a multi-day training curriculum. I found that quite elaborate, and I might say that don't be overwhelmed. I think what we tried to share in Waterloo was just this basic story of me, story of us, story of now, and just to empower people and encourage them to get out and share their stories. You know, the analysis is helpful, but we don't want to get caught up in that, because there's something about telling our own story that automatically becomes engaging and excites us, and that comes through in our messaging as well. So I think that was all I wanted to say for now. And we're going to move on to hear a personal story. And I'm going to introduce to you Sara Haalboon. And Sara recently returned to her hometown of Kitchener after graduating with a bachelor's degree in ecology and sustainability at Dalhousie University. When she was in Nova Scotia, she conducted research looking at barriers and opportunities for young farmers. I thought that's a great topic, Sara. And this propelled her towards learning more about food systems. Now she's back in Ontario, and she's involved in a variety of local food-related initiatives, including the Food Spaces Vibrant Places campaign. Welcome, Sara.
Hello.
Hey, we just have one slide for you. You'll have to describe it to people later, but right for now they can just enjoy the greenery. So Sara, can you begin by telling us what's your background in working for policy change?
Sure. So I've definitely never been involved in anything like this campaign before. Pretty much what I've done in the past has just been on the receiving end of petitions and offering my support by signing them. But I've definitely never been involved in like a community group advocating for specific asks and meeting with candidates and other citizens face-to-face. So this is definitely my first time doing something like this.
That's great, and I'm really happy that you're here to share this perspective, because I'm gonna ask you the next question, which I think we hadn't talked about before, but I feel like it might be helpful for people to hear just a little more clearly the activity that, because I was going to go on to ask you to describe the conversations you had with councillors and candidates, but maybe just before that, could you just explain sort of what the volunteers on the campaign went out to do?
Sure. So there were really 2 parts, and one of the main parts was going and meeting with candidates for the either municipal wards or the mayors for Cambridge, Kitchener, and Waterloo, and talking with them about our campaign and our asks, and getting a sense of their own platform and where their ideas might fit in with what we were talking about. And then the other part was, again, speaking with people and asking them to sign the petition.
Great, yeah. And so those are like pretty common elements in campaigns I know that I've been involved in the past. So can you now describe about the conversations you had with the councillors and candidates, and sort of what was it like when you took more of a storytelling approach?
Yes. So myself, I met with 5 candidates throughout this process, and all of them were people running in my own ward. And none of them were an incumbent, so they were all fresh faces, I guess.
And I met with them along with another volunteer who also lives in the ward. And we chose to meet with the candidates at the garden that you can see on the slide. This is a new community garden that was just established this year in the ward beside ours. And we wanted to meet with candidates here because our ward doesn't actually have any sort of community garden like this, so it was a really great jumping off point, and it really helped establish the topic. So we definitely both brought our own personal connections to the issues. The other volunteer who I did the meetings with, she's a naturopath, so she really was interested in the topic of access to healthy food and having people learn more about, where their food is coming from and looking at it from a nutritional perspective. Whereas for me, it was a lot more about being a young person and wanting to have spaces in my neighborhood where there's a lot of social connection, where people are outside and where you can, I guess be there more for a social sense, but also, like you said in the introduction, I am interested in food systems, and I see community gardens and temporary farmers markets as a great way to facilitate these social spaces. So those are the personal stories that we brought to the conversations, and we really found that by being able to speak from our own personal perspective on the issue, it really opened up the conversations, and being in that space really helped the candidates to find ways to connect with what we were saying and to jump off of it themselves and really expand on different parts of what we were asking about.
So even when you were speaking about getting out as a younger member of the community outside, that was resonating with some of my history. So I was watching how storytelling in action happens. Is there any particular example you want to share of a counselor, or sorry, a candidate in this case, sort of how, so you said they were able to kind of make links to their own personal stories, and then from there elaborate with you sort of what the possibilities were, or can you clarify?
Yeah, sure. So of the 5 candidates that we met with, each of them definitely had their own platforms and their own reasons for running, but we found that everyone who we spoke with had some part of their campaign that really connected to community building, safe neighborhoods, civic engagement, and these things are all things that were part of creating food spaces in the neighborhoods. So for example, one candidate, he has been involved in some of the seniors' residences in our ward, and there's quite a few, and he really could see this as a way to bring gardens to seniors' homes, and then, have that as a way to connect the community and to create a more public space and to have knowledge sharing through community gardens. Another candidate, he is really involved in the neighborhood association, so he could see how this would benefit a community center, and how using how the connections that the community center already has in the community could really could help with a community garden as well. So everyone brought their own sense of where they could really become part or put themselves behind the issue, I guess, and how they felt it already contributed to what they were working for in their campaign.
Those are great examples. Yeah, thank you. So my last question is, what have you learned from this experience of building relationships, and what has changed in your perspective as a result?
Sure. So it goes along with what you and Krista were talking about already. Basically that before becoming involved, or before really starting these meetings, I was a little bit intimidated because even though I had read the background document and I felt like I had a good understanding of why food spaces are important, being able to communicate that in a conversation without, having to refer to notes, I didn't feel like I would be able to do that and be confident. But in the meetings, I found that it didn't have to be about just presenting all the facts. It was a lot more about talking to people about what my opinion was, learning their opinion, and trying to find a common ground. And also, I found that it got a lot easier as we went along, and I think part of this was just being able to speak on these points with experience, but then also a big part of it was being able to draw on what other volunteers were saying about their meetings with counselors. So we would meet up again every few weeks, and we would share the responses we had heard. And then another big part of it, which was really exciting, was also that because we were also having the petitions going out to counselors, later on in the meetings, the counselors, or I should say the candidates, had already heard about us and had already even maybe read the petition and already had a sense of what we wanted to talk to them about, so could respond to us with that knowledge already. So I definitely feel like, for myself, I could speak to my counselor and my candidate now without feeling the need that I need to be an expert or that I need so much information going to them. I think I see it as a lot more of an ongoing conversation that you can have. And if there's questions at the end, you can always get back to them, and it also kind of invites that ongoing dialogue. If you can say, okay, I don't know that necessarily, but I'd love to follow up with you in an email, or I'd love to put you in touch with Krista, our campaign coordinator, who's done a lot of the background research, or whatever it might be.
So in that instance, the lack of information is actually an asset. You can use it as an asset. That's great. Thank you so much, Sara. We have some more time, just like Nicole. We're all very efficient in our preparations, but I wanted to open it up then again back to Krista, because I think we had agreed if we had a little extra time at the end that you might comment for 5 minutes on the impacts of the campaign so far and maybe looking forward.
Great, thanks, Gillian. And I just wanted to make another quick note about how we actually organize the volunteers.
That would be great, yeah.
Within the campaign. You heard Sara mention that she met with all of the candidates within her ward, and that was very intentional. It was an intentional part of this campaign because we wanted people to be able to speak about where they lived. And so we actually recruited and found volunteers for almost all of the wards throughout Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo, and we matched them with the candidates where they lived. And I think that led to a lot of success in the campaign. But so I'm just going to share some of that success. So I just found out today, thanks to the great support from Mark Schwerb at the Waterloo Region Public Health, he gave me the statistics, the results of the election, and it looks like we have about 50% of the candidates that have been elected actually declared support for our campaign and supporting more community gardens and temporary farmers markets in our city. So that's pretty exciting. And of those 50, or of those ones that were elected that actually declared their support, we saw that actually throughout the campaign in a number of ways. So many of those candidates actually included vibrant food spaces and markets and gardens in their election platforms. And it seemed like they included them in response to all of the petitions that they were receiving, all of the information they were receiving, and all of the meetings that they were having with the volunteers, because we were kind of actually surprised by the amount of people that included that in their messaging. And throughout the campaign as well, a lot of the candidates would post blog messages or Facebook messages that expressed their support. They referenced the campaign, so that was really interesting. A lot of other candidates that were not elected also showed their support as well, which was unfortunate. But so some of the immediate results that we're seeing, we have actually been invited into the early stages of the bylaw review and update process by the City of Kitchener. So the roundtable is now actually being invited to the table as somebody that they see as an important organization within the community. So whereas before we would have to come in kind of at the back end through the public consultation process, but now we're being invited into the earlier stages of the process. And then the City of Waterloo, we found out partway through the campaign that they have already been working on their licensing bylaws, and as a result of all of the information that we've brought forward, the council all voted in favor of including temporary farmers markets within their updated licensing bylaws and providing a very reasonable fee for temporary farmers markets to operate within the city, which were two of our asks within the campaign as well. So it's great to see these immediate results, and we look forward to continuing the dialogue with the newly elected councillors and following through with the zoning bylaw review process, because we will be actually engaging our volunteers from this project in the follow-up with the process where we do the public meetings to City Council.
It's very exciting to hear, Krista, because I think when I talked with Mark and you back in last winter, you know, there was a group of 8 really committed volunteers. You had done your research. There had been a lot of turnout, I think, to some meetings you had had in the previous year. But when I hear you talk now, it just really sounds like a movement, right? With that power of a movement, and it's neat, especially knowing that there's such a diversity of stakeholders on board, you know.
Absolutely.
So I think people might have some other questions later on, but we have one here that Andrea put up, which is, how did you recruit the volunteers in each ward?
That's a good question. Through our typical channels of the Roundtable has a large network of followers and members, so that receive the Roundtable's updates regularly. So we have actively promoted the campaign before we actually got started to recruit people. Some of it was word of mouth, some of it was through other community organizations that we have networked through. And then we intentionally kind of followed up with people to say, okay, these wards are still available, who would like to join our team, and yeah, it was a bit of kind of back and forth. So open recruitment, then taking a look at where people lived and which wards they were in, matching them with the candidates, and then trying to fill in the gaps however we could.
Great.
I hope that answers your question.
It does. I can hear there's another matrix. Right? There's another matrix chart there that has the volunteers and the wards and whatever. I'm going to pass it back to Andrea now. Thank you, both of you, so much for participating.
Well, I just want to say, it's Andrea Bodkin from HC Link. I want to say thank you to everyone. Like probably many of you, I have found the 10-month-long municipal election campaign very long, and I'm a political junkie, and I actually found myself about 6 weeks ago just feeling like I had kind of had enough, and especially today was just really feeling kind of exhausted by the whole process, and this has actually really re-energized me. I have to say, I'm a cyclist. Anyone who follows me on Twitter knows that I'm constantly posting pictures of people parked in bike lanes and posting about all those kinds of things, but I'm actually kind of feeling like it might be an opportunity for me to become more engaged as a citizen in some of the local issues that are important to me, bike lanes being only one of them. So I really want to thank everyone for sharing their stories and sharing their passion. I think I'm going to just turn the floor over to everyone else and let people ask some questions. I'm going to expand the chat box here so that we've got lots of space for people to post their questions and their comments. And I'm also just going to post a link for a resource that Gillian wrote quite recently about engaging the power of story that might be really helpful for folks. And I'm just going to give everyone just a few moments to type their questions into the chat box and allow Nicole and Krista and Sara to maybe a couple of minutes if there's anything else that you want to share or add, or maybe questions that you have for one another.
And I'll use that pause just to say that that last link that went up, it was a broader conversation about storytelling and evaluation and sort of other contexts as well. But there is some of the public narrative in there as well. So if you're interested in the broader links and resources, you check that one out.
So we do have some questions coming up. Oh, great question from Sue S. about the kind of training that volunteers got in Waterloo before they went out and met with the candidates.
Well, that was Krista and I together.
Yes.
You know what note I have? I was just looking for. There was something we talked about. Yes, one of the things we had them talk about, like in pairs, as part of that training, was when did someone influence you and why? So we actually started them out, the volunteers out in talking and sharing some stories with each other about how they were influenced. So that piece of trying to put yourself on the other side. I remember that. Do you want to share the overall training plan? You might have a better take.
Sure. So Gillian and I pulled this training session together. That sounded funny. But what we focused on was first kind of training them in Municipal Policy 101. So I provided the background and rationale. What had the roundtable done up until this point? Why were we doing it? Why was it important? The key issues and barriers within the zoning bylaws that we were trying to get changed. We kept it very basic, though, so that it was a general understanding and really about why this was important, not so much getting them to know exactly all of the policies and what needed to be changed. And then moving into more of the storytelling. So then Gillian really took over the next part of the training and led them through those kinds of questions like who influenced you, when and how, and sharing their stories and talking together and kind of building almost like a draft dialogue that they would then use to take to the counselors. So it was like a My Campaign call, like a kind of a messaging tool that they used. And then we did some mock meetings with counselors, or candidates. Gillian had provided us with 3 examples of the types of candidates that you might encounter, and so myself and a couple other team members played those roles, and then each of the volunteers had a chance in a group of 2 or 3 to do a mock meeting. And then we trained them also on the social media part of the campaign as well. But I should also mention that throughout the campaign we met regularly. So every month we would meet and get together and talk about challenges and barriers and responses from candidates. And we would share any online responses that were received through email or on blog posts or whatever, so that we were always working together to look at, okay, what are responses are we receiving, what are the challenges, how can we work around this, and what are our recommendations to each other. And so we really maintain that dialogue. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. So I have a couple of thoughts that I'll just share and kind of wrapping up as we're waiting to see if anyone else has any questions. One of the things, or 2 instances I'm thinking about, and hopefully I'll be able to remember them both by the time I finish my little piece here, but the first thing that I'm thinking about is our funders, which are generally speaking ministries, government ministries, are always asking us as funded projects for stories. You know, I send in my 45-page final report every year with statistics and pie charts and all of that stuff, which I think is important and is good and juicy for me. But what they always come back and ask me for is, so what does this actually mean? Give me a story. And I know that from another perspective, local councillors, local MPs, and local MPPs, often when they're campaigning, I remember that in the recent Ontario election, Kathleen Wynne, I'm pretty sure I'm not making this up, and Olivia Chow did this in Toronto as well, they actually had a person that they referred to throughout each of their campaigns. Maybe one of them was named Sue, but they actually created, I don't know whether it was a real person or whether it was a character that they created to kind of exemplify some of the key points of their campaign. Because when we make those stories more personal, when we get away from the pie chart and talk about some of the people that are affected, then that actually resonates with people a little bit more. The other thing I just wanted to mention, this is an editorial from Maclean's magazine. I'm just posting the link in the chat box. I don't know if many of you have seen this yet, but it certainly has some folks in the public health field in a little bit of a tizzy. An editorial from Maclean's magazine basically telling public health to stop meddling about in chronic disease prevention and get back to treating infectious disease where we belong. We should be controlling Ebola. And I have lots of reactions to that article, and I bet lots of you do too, but I'm wondering if in the face of articles such as this, if getting back to the power of storytelling can really kind of make a difference with that kind of rhetoric. So do we have any more questions for any of our speakers, or anything else any of our speakers would like to add?
I wanted to ask Nicole about, because I think we've had this two-sided presentation, and maybe if you had any comments and thoughts, because I love your tool in terms of, setting up and organizing and analyzing the mounds of information, right? And then Sara talked about being overwhelmed with that information. Certainly having a matrix with boxes makes it so much easier to kind of grab and go, as I saw, sort of, well, what are the values there? What are the linkages? But did you have any comments further that you wanted to share in terms of your tool and maybe in reference to the stories that were shared from Waterloo Region?
You know what, I think that both of the two work very nicely together. So as you did mention, these tools, the matrix, provides a lot of information in one document. So it is kind of that go-to for when people who are working with their communities, working with the elected officials, can kind of take bits and pieces of that information and then develop their stories, develop kind of the case to move something forward. The nature of my role is to compile all that information and then have it available in usable ways for health promoters, dietitians, to use when they're out in the community trying to move an initiative forward. So they work very nicely together. And I really liked hearing how you use that, because I don't necessarily get to be out in the community working in that capacity.
Do you have any example of those? I can imagine, those various people within your organization who come to you and sort of grab and go with that information. What have they done?
A lot of the work is around active transportation. Mm-hmm. Some of it is also around healthy eating. And we have a Fueling Healthy Bodies initiative, which aims to create healthier environments in recreation centers, so incorporating healthier foods in those settings. So that's another area where we've kind of gauged where municipalities would probably be interested in incorporating these healthier options, because as part of their strategic plans, healthier communities was included in that. So those are just two specific topic areas where we've gauged who our partners are going to be. So the Fueling Healthy Bodies initiative, we're now expanding, so we're working with a variety of new municipalities, whereas last year we only had 3, and now we have potentially 8 for the next season. So this helps gauge who we would connect with, who our likely partners would be. So that's just an example of how we've kind of used it as a tool to gauge partnerships.
And develop.
Fantastic. All right, so I just have a few things comment on in closing. And the first is, of course, I want to say a great big thank you to the speakers in today's webinar. It's just been such a privilege to hear your stories and to hear about what it is that you've been working on. So thank you to Gillian, Krista, Sara, and to Nicole. And I wanted to just take a couple of quick seconds to talk to you a little bit about some of the ways that HC Link can help support each of you on your policy development journeys. And the first is our policy learning community, which is online. We've just moved to a brand new platform that is very easy to use and has lots of fun features. And we also have on our website, which is hclinkontario.ca, you can find a whole variety of resources in the topic of policy development. You'll see a link for our learning community. You'll see a brand new policy resource on getting started with policy for healthy communities. We've just released the recording from the first webinar in our series of 4, and a whole bunch of other really interesting, in my highly biased opinion, interesting and useful resources that are on our website. And I also wanted to mention that we are available to help you in your policy efforts. We've got our online learning community, our resources, and consulting services, such as what you've heard today about Gillian supporting Waterloo Region with their volunteer training. We also have some tailored workshops that we can provide to help you out. So I'd really encourage you to contact us, to contact Gillian and myself directly, or to contact us through the website and learn a little bit more about how we can support you. We are funded by the Government of Ontario, and so as such, many of our services are provided free of charge, so you can talk to us and find out how we can support you. The link to our website in English and in French. And the last thing that I'll just mention is in 9 minutes, we're starting a Twitter chat. The hashtag is #HealthPromoChat on the same topic. It's October 28th, now what? So I'd encourage you to check out Twitter in a few minutes and join us for that. I will be writing up a blog post on this webinar and the Twitter chat, which will be posted either late tonight or first thing in the morning, and I hope that you will all check that out. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm going to end the meeting, and in doing so, give you the link for this survey. So thank you so much, everyone, and